Hello and welcome to the Authentic Uprising Show. I'm your host, Jill Simons. I am so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. This show is a place where we pour into our concept of who we are, how we've been created with intention by God, and how we can live out of the freedom that He has for us more every single day. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I love to be with you every single Tuesday. And I'm so excited to share this specific episode with you because the person that I'm going to be chatting with today is just a really, really beautiful voice in the space of fighting lies for Christian women. And she has a new book out that is so empowering around this lie that we're talking about here in the month of March, but also what we covered in January. And so her new book is called A Work in Progress. And Julia Hogan Werner is a licensed professional counselor who specializes in helping women really break through these obstacles that they are facing in their lives to embrace the fullness of what God has for them. And that's why I could not be more excited to be chatting with her today. So thank you so much for being with me, Julia.
Thanks for having me, Jill. I'm so excited to be here and talk through all of these things. Highlight of my week, to be honest.
Oh, praise God. Well, that's awesome. So let's get started with talking about what it was that urged you to write this book about being a work in progress.
Yes. Yeah. So my first book was all about authentic self-care, and I felt really passionate about that. And that kind of stemmed from a personal experience in my life of just not taking care of myself in college and burning out, and that was not fun. So once I wrote that book, I just had such an amazing experience writing the book and sharing it. I wanted to do something else. So I was thinking about, what other topics do I feel really passionate about? Do I see a need for? And that got me thinking about all of these amazing topics that I had learned in graduate school and then in my adult life that I kind of couldn't believe, to be honest, that we hadn't been taught, or at least in my school, we hadn't had any kind of, social emotional learning on these things. So things as simple as like the concept of boundaries. I had never even heard that before. And then in grad school, it started coming up, and then I started reading about it, and it was just like eye-opening, life-changing, right? Oh, this is what a healthy, this is part of a healthy relationship. And just, through my own personal work, but then also in working with my clients, seeing all of these kind of skills that seem really obvious to a certain extent, in the sense of, yeah, like, setting limits is really healthy in a relationship, or I need to know my values in life in order to know where I'm going to go and where I want to head and what kind of decisions I'm going to be making, or I need to evaluate these expectations that I've just adopted in my life. Where are they coming from? Are they rooted in reality? Are they arbitrary? Are they flat out lies? Have I taken the time to evaluate them? So when I was, coming up with this idea for the book, I thought, these are the things I wish I had learned earlier in life. And I wrote it from the perspective of, honestly, it can be for anybody at any stage in their life, right? If you're thinking, I want to learn more about these skills, the book is for you. But I was specifically thinking about young adults, those who are, freshly graduated from college, early in their career, and maybe are feeling a little bit behind in life, that they're thinking, okay, I don't have my dream job yet, or I have no idea what I want to do with my life. Where do I like where I'm living? Do I like my friends? I'm not in a relationship yet. Or I thought I hear this a lot. I thought I would be married and have a couple kids by now, or something like that. And so this book is really written for if you feel like you're in that stage of life. And it's very action oriented, very, skills focused, I would say. Here are the things that kind of can help you get a sense of purpose in your life right now, where you are, without feeling like your life is just on this like perpetual hold until you check off that life event, if that makes sense. So this is the book that I wish I had way back when.
I think that that's such a beautiful place to create things from. And that's so much of what I do. And I think that's part of why I always just love talking to you, because we are on such like parallel journeys, I
Mhm.
think, where it's so much about what was missing from our experiences of, college life, young adulthood, where I resonate so much with that. Like, boundaries are a thing. Like, I was in my mid 20s before anybody told me about that. And I was like, wow, now everything is already awful and I need to like go back and redo all of this. And this would have been much easier if this had ever been a part of my vocabulary before now. And so I think that that's such a powerful tool to give to people. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about women in our season of life, looking at how we can empower the women younger than us, because it's all about that intergenerational wisdom that we've just lost so many of the avenues for us to share
Oh,
that.
that's a
And
good point. Yeah, I never thought about it that way actually, but you're right.
it's really a beautiful thing to then get to be a part of. And so your book came out last week and is available on Amazon. And we're going to be talking today about how there's actionable things in the book for really about how to approach life when it feels like everything's on hold or this thing isn't going to happen. And what I'd love to start with is talking about finding the balance of really holding space for hope while still accepting what is.
Yes, which can be so hard to do, right? It's a skill. But yes, that I think sometimes we feel like we can only feel one thing, and I'm sure many of the listeners have heard that, started to see more about that concept of both and, right? That I can be both excited and scared at the same time, or I can be hopeful, but also feeling a little bit maybe skeptical, about something going on in life. So it is really tough to hold those two in tension, but I think it is incredibly valuable because life isn't black and white. It isn't all or nothing, right? It isn't perfection or failure. There is that sort of nuance in everything that we do. And I think, especially if we're feeling like my life is on hold, or I'm in a really tough season of life, or things just aren't working out, or maybe I feel like I'm at the beginning of my healing journey, right? Where I'm like, oh, this is all terrible. And I'm like in the depths, or I can't get any lower and I've got to climb back out. How do I hold hope when I see everything that I need to do or everything that I need to be healed from? And I think that there's this, I think we can kind of, in those difficult moments, we can tend in two directions. And I talk about it in my book, where we can either go into like control mode, where we say, I have to control everything, my environment, my actions. I can never make a mistake. I have to have the final say in everything, how people treat me, or how much work I put into something, so that I don't, like, I'm always kind of running away or trying to stay one step ahead of that fear that everything's going to fall apart and that it's not going to work out how I want it to work out. So there's that end of the spectrum. And on the other end, there's this sort of like hands off kind of like, there's nothing I can do about this. And it's all in God's hands, but more in like a dismissive way, like a fatalistic, there's not, I give up. Right. So nothing that I can do can change the outcome of my life. And it's already messed up anyway. So I may as well just, I don't know, coast, or it's never going to get any better. Right. But I think both of those operate from more of a scarcity mindset rather than that abundance mindset, right? That there's, a scarcity mindset says there's not enough out there for everybody. There's only a finite amount of goodness or grace, or I don't know, success, but not necessarily in like the worldly definition of success, but like living a meaningful life and those sorts of things. Scarcity mindset says we're all in competition for that, right? That's one person's success is basically your failure because they got something and now you don't have it. But that can be I think it's a fear driven way to live. And it kind of closes off that possibility of feeling hopeful because it's already coming from this worldview of there's not enough out there. So how can you hope for something if your belief is there's not enough out there? So an abundance mindset kind of takes those two extremes and brings them into the middle and says, okay, what's within your control, right? That there are things outside of our control, and that's okay, right? We don't have to control everything, because then we just drive ourselves, up a wall trying to control things we can't control. And then looking at too, what do I need to let go of, right? What am I trying to hold on to that actually isn't serving me or is actually really holding me back? And I think it's in that middle ground that you can find that hope, even in the midst of difficulties, that you can say, okay, I can focus on what, God is maybe inviting me to focus on, and I can let go of what he's inviting me to let go of. And that is where I can find that hope in that middle space there.
Absolutely. That reminds me, as you were initially talking, it reminds me so much of the movie Inside Out,
Oh
where
yeah.
there's
Which
like,
I haven't seen.
you haven't seen, oh
I know,
no.
like
Okay.
every
Well, I'm
therapist
gonna
has
just
seen it.
totally spoil it for you. I'm sorry.
I've heard it's really good. You can spoil it. Go for it.
Okay. It's wonderful. But essentially, like the main character reaches sort of a new level of maturity when there's the ability to feel two things at once, when there's like a mix of the emotions that become the core of who she is, where it isn't just about this has to be all happy or this has to be all sad. It's something where she can feel those two things at once. And it occurs to me that's really a hallmark of her moving into a new level of maturity within the movie. And I think that spiritually, there's a lot of us who don't step into the fullness of the maturity available to us, maybe, at our age, even. I think that a lot of people's spiritual maturity doesn't necessarily match their chronological age.
Mhm.
And so allowing there to be this mix of emotion and feeling in it, and still be able to progress and interact with that feeling and have that be something that can be meaningful despite sort of the messiness of it almost.
Mhm. Yeah, I would agree with that, because I think that I think I was when you were talking, it kind of got me thinking about another part in the book where I talk about identifying your values and knowing your priorities. And like, I guess a big theme in both of those chapters is, if you know what's important to you, so kind of to that maturity you were just speaking to, and if you know what living out those values looks like on a day-to-day basis, you can be doing that even in like a messy season of life, or a really challenging part of your life, or part of your life where you feel like everything's just on hold, or you're just hitting one roadblock after another. But that's sort of like, well, if my values are never changing, if I'm focusing on living my life according to those values that I've defined for myself in difficult moments and awesome, amazing, fulfilling moments, I can, like, I'm on the right path no matter what, right? It kind of removes that lie that we have to achieve, or that we have to do things in order to have a sense of progress or have a sense of worth, right? That we can say, okay, it's not so much what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing these things. How am I approaching this difficult season? Or how am I approaching a really great season of life, a joyful season too? Am I honoring my values? And if I am, then I'm living that authentic life that we're all searching for, that we all want to live.
Mhm. And that makes me think about the fact that, because what you're really talking about is that sense of continuity,
Yes.
where things are connected in a meaningful way, that you can follow the line of your life essentially. And as you were talking about that, it made me think that really, in a lot of ways, I think God is inviting us into letting him be that sense of continuity
Mhm.
in our lives, where really there's that prevailing awareness that regardless of the season, or regardless of what was going on, or regardless of how I felt about it, there's an awareness and a relationship with God that carries through that, that also is really that sustaining force of the hope. Because I think that's the other place in all of this that people get into trouble, is like trying to generate that hope from themselves when life is really challenging. And I think that's what a huge obstacle that they run into then in secular counseling is like, okay, but where is this going to come from? Because there's not necessarily that internal power in those really challenging moments to sustain that kind of hope and faith that really is a supernatural gift that we believe as Christians we receive just as much as we participate in it.
Absolutely. Yes. That's, I mean, so like, well, so well said, better than I could even say it. You're absolutely right. I think, we can't, I think sometimes we can get stuck in this mindset that having hope means saying it's all going to turn out fine, right? Everything's going to be okay. But the reality is sometimes it, in sort of, I guess, how we might define being okay, right? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes things end or we get news that we like is our worst fear, and but it is, right, a diagnosis of some sort, a relationship ending, someone passing away. Those are all like, even losing your job, right, really difficult moments that we just, I mean, we don't want to ever go through, but then we're faced with them. And I think sometimes we can confuse hope with, I have to believe everything's going to be fine and it's all going to turn out okay. But again, back to that idea of holding that tension, right, to be able, like you said, to access that deeper supernatural sense of hope that says this is not, what's a good way of putting it, like, um kind of, it's not so much what happens, it's how I navigate what I'm given, right? And I talk about this book all the time, Man's Search for Meaning, because it's just so good, right? And the whole point of his book is that if you have a reason for living your life, it can get you through anything. And I love the book. I think it's so powerful because he's not just some professor writing from like an ivory tower, right? Like, this is a man who was imprisoned in a concentration camp, lost his wife, saw people die around him, went through incredible suffering. And he's the one who says, if you have meaning, you can navigate anything, right? And he makes the point in the book, it's not if you have hope, you'll survive. It's you will find meaning even in the most difficult circumstances. And that's like a meaningful life, right? Or that's where God meets you in those moments, not in the success or the stereotypical like blessing, right? But more in the, those really challenging moments and how you choose to handle them. I think that's where that supernatural hope can blossom.
Absolutely. That's by Viktor Frankl, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I
So
thought.
good. If anybody hasn't read it, it's not long at all. It is just the best.
Yeah, yeah, I have loved that book as well. Because I think that that is one of the places where this lie gets so entrenched in our mindsets, because when you look at our cultural approach to hard things, it's so contrary to this. I think that the vast majority of people who advocate for a lot of the measures that they want to put in place to be able to um, not have a baby they might be pregnant with, not have to live with a chronic or debilitating illness that's likely to be terminal, things like that, comes from this place of it's impossible for there to be any redeeming value in what's happening right now because I absolutely cannot see it. And I think that that is something that leads to more and more and more becoming meaningless when you start down that path of like, well, there's not really meaning in this, well, there's not really meaning in that, there's not really meaning in this other thing. You come up with this smaller and smaller and smaller circle of things that where it feels like, oh, okay, I can be, joyful, at peace, happy in this amount of circumstances. And that's what you see so much in the lives of like the rich and famous, right? Where they have what should be this kind of just idyllic existence, where there's still so many instances of addiction, mental health issues, et cetera, because they're still not finding that meaning, even in just like you said, like the vast blessings of their circumstances. And obviously that's not uniformly the case, but is the case in a lot of situations. And looking at how we can take our approach to things, really, like you said, the way that we live into all of life, that being something that really is almost what redeems these situations, not necessarily in the moment that we're experiencing them, but I think very much in the hindsight of re-interacting with what has happened to us in life and being able to see this is either who I became because of what I've been through, or this is really the fruit that this
Mhm.
challenging situation has brought about in my life.
Mhm. Yes, and I think a lot of people experience that, where in the moment you're like, "This makes no sense. How could anything good come out of this?" And then, yes, absolutely. Later in life, you can look back and you can say, "I see how I grew in that area," right? Or how I had to really let go of something that I was holding on to, like a false sense of security or whatever. And I can see how that, made me the person I am today. And I think that it's it's really hard work, right? I think that's kind of the point that we're making, is it's not, having hope is not getting like a I get out of jail free pass or something, right? Where it's like, oh no, it's fine because you have hope. It can really be entering into that struggle, and it can be really difficult and really painful and really challenging. And that, again, that's back to that idea of nuance. But I think, what we were saying at the beginning, that sometimes there can be this, like, why there's nothing I can do, right? That I just give up. And I think I see that a lot in a lot of like social media posts, right? Like if someone is, toxic to you, or someone is, not giving you energy, or someone, or this circumstance in your life is not serving you, let go of it. And of course, there's truth to that, right? But again, there's nuance in everything. And that's more my point, is yes, if that someone is, truly toxic and harmful for you, there's no place for them in your life, right? And that's a time to talk about really hard, firm boundaries, etc. But I think sometimes that can kind of snowball into what you were saying, Jill, like, oh, this is a difficult moment. This is too much for me. I can't do this. So I'm just going to, quit it, or I'm going to, just distance myself from it because I don't want to deal with that suffering or that hardship, right? Because it's it's too much for me. And so sometimes you do see that as well, like this kind of just shut everything down because I don't want to deal with that suffering, which on one hand is understandable because we're talking about how challenging it is. It can be so scary. And I think, again, that's where that hope comes in, right? Because that gives you that resilience, or like direction that you can go in those moments, rather than feeling like your only option is, either running away or just shutting it completely down.
And I think that so often that hope looks like, just, if nothing else, like having that vision that someday the hindsight is going to
Yes.
explain it. I think of the situation this year. So my oldest son is special needs and was rejected from every school that we
Oh,
tried to get him into this year. And so I'm homeschooling him this year while working full time from the shop. And he
oh.
has to do curriculum in a method that's not great for him. It's
Mm,
not great work environment for me. And all year, this has been this question of like, okay, really, like, why is this what we're doing this year, God? Like,
mm.
what is going on here? And I think that, it's March of this year, and I'm like, anytime you want to like tell me what we're doing here, that'd be real awesome.
I'm
Um,
waiting.
because yeah, I still don't really have the vision for that yet, but I think that that is very much where the hope is. It's just like, well, at some point, he might be 20 years old, but at some point, I'm going to be like, okay, this is what we really like reaped from this year that seemed mostly just awful for everybody. Um,
Mm,
because that has been the situation, or that has been the impetus of the hope, I think. Not that it's going to get any easier to actually do this year, but like really giving God the benefit of the doubt, honestly, is what it comes down to. That like eventually the promises in scripture are going to be made good, that he will work everything together for good for those that love him. And just being like, okay, that is what has been promised. I'm going to go with that, despite the fact that I'm not a fan.
yes, but also if you want to give me some insight, that would
Yes.
be
Oh yeah.
great.
We're always
Not saying
take
no to
that.
that. Yeah, someone, I heard this analogy somewhere. I didn't come up with it. Maybe you've heard it too, but someone said that when we see our lives, it's like looking at the back of a tapestry, right? Where you see the messy threads. There's no pattern. It makes no sense. It honestly kind of looks like an ugly mess, right? But that God is seeing the right side of the tapestry, right? So he sees all the colors coming together and connecting, and crossing over here and going over there and, doing all of these things. And that, even if in this life we don't fully get to see the tapestry, in the next we'll be able to see, and then we'll have the like, oh, this is all making sense. But we do get glimpses of that, and I think that's what you're saying, like throughout our lives we get some glimpses of, oh, I'm seeing how this, like, there's no way I could have known that this would have worked out the way it was, or that this would have helped me later in life. Like, who would have thought? But here I am, and I can come from a place of gratitude, seeing how, God worked his in our lives, even in way, especially in ways that, we as humans would be like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to do that. Or why am I doing this? Right?
Mhm. And I think that's where it's so powerful. In the Old Testament, they talk about like having or encouraging the people of Israel to have like these stones that they place to like have the memory of what God has done for them in different places. And I think that that's such a powerful personal practice to adopt, is really like, okay, where can I draw the evidence from in
Mhm.
my life that this is reasonable? Because I mean, and I'm sure you know much more about this than I do as a therapist, but kind of our brains will reject things that seem unreasonable or seem unsafe.
Mhm.
And so if we're trying to, again, personally generate this hope from a place of scarcity, from a place of this doesn't actually make any sense, there's going to be such a mental struggle around that. Versus if we're able to really look back of the story of our own lives, maybe the lives of people that we love and know, our parents, our spouse, our siblings, things like that, and say, okay, but here's the really clear evidence in hindsight that I have of where God has been faithful, where I have seen in hindsight the good things coming from it, and making that something that you actually like, whether it's a written record of it or if it's, whatever method of recording that, so you actually have something to go to kind of restore that hope in hard
Oh,
moments,
yeah.
so that it's not coming from this like illogical place.
Hmm. Or like feeling forced, right? Or yeah, I love that idea actually. It's like a gratitude journal, but like on steroids, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's we kind of I think when we think of God acting in our lives, we can get stuck in this mindset of it has to be like a miracle, right? Or like the heavens opening and a lightning bolt coming down from the sky. Those things have not happened to me. I don't know about you. But we miss those little things. That's more my point, right? Is those moments like maybe you're in a really difficult part of your life and that doesn't seem like it's going to change, but you experience the support or kindness of a neighbor or a friend or a family member, right, who's accompanying you through that, or someone reaches out to you, or someone, I don't know, sends you a kind note and they have no idea what's going on, right? Like all of those things too, I think can go on a list like that of moments where I'm seeing sort of like how everything is connected and God can work through people and not just these big lightning bolt moments. It's the back to the Old Testament when God is in the wind, right? When he speaks to Moses, it's that quiet whisper. I always love that passage because I'm like, we're always looking for the big, and we need,
Mhm.
I think, to be open more to those quiet moments.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of the things that really are functional miracles still come across that way. Like when I
Yeah.
was pregnant with my first child, we literally could not diaper this baby. Like there was no money to make this child
Oh,
live. And we were
I thought
like,
you meant he was resistant to being.
oh, no, yeah. So
Okay.
he was, I mean, we had no resources to bring to bear at the time. And so that was very much the prayer of the pregnancy, was like, well, okay, I guess you want him to live. So you're going to have to take care of him, God. And what happened actually is my husband was teaching middle school and the parents were like, well, we'd like to do something for you. They threw a diaper drive, and
Oh
our
my
oldest
God.
or our second child was almost 2 before we ever bought a single diaper. We didn't buy diapers at all
Oh
with
my
our first
God.
child until our second child was 2. And that is something that I think it's so clearly like, yes, that is a miracle that we received, but yet it's so easy when I don't think about it in that
Mhm.
context to be like, oh, well, what if God doesn't provide for our family? It's like, okay, he's kind of like gone to the lengths before.
Right,
And
remember those 2 years or probably longer, like
exactly.
3, right?
It was like 5.
Oh my gosh, your whole, like, house must have been full.
We had diapers at my mother-in-law's, at my parents. Like it was, yeah. And so we would
It's
just,
like the loaves and the fishes, right?
it
Or like
was,
the feeding of the 5,000. It's like
yep.
someone throws you a diaper drive and then all of a sudden you're, oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was it was such a gift, but it's one of those things where things mean what we make them mean.
Yeah.
And that could happen. That did happen to us. And at that point in our lives, there was still so much like, okay, but that was a one-off, like
Mhm.
there's still not that like comprehensive attitude of trust that is the invitation when those things happen. Whereas now at this point in my life, I do make a practice of like, let's remember these things. Let's talk about these things. Let's tell the story over and over again
Oh
so that
yeah.
I hear it over and over again, so that I remember that this is what the Lord has done for me.
Yeah, I love that because we do. We just naturally have well, I would say confirmation bias, right? So if we think that nothing will work out, then we look for the things that tell us nothing will work out, right? But if we say, no, I don't understand how, or I don't know why, but God's going to show me the way, then we're looking for that. Sometimes I'll share it with my clients. I think um, it's one of the baseball movies, and I'm not going to remember which one. Maybe Angels in the Outfield, where they say, "If you build it, they will come."
Yep.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I
So I
do.
always
Well, no, it's Field of
Field
Dreams
of Dreams. Yes,
because
I'm
I'm
always
from
like,
Iowa.
okay, yes, perfect. Yeah, so I'll often use that phrase with my clients. I'll say, you have to build it, right? You have to make room for it, and then that grace will come in, or that answer will come in, or the next step, or the direction, or maybe it feels like a tiny breadcrumb that will come. But if you don't make room for it in the sense of widening your perspective or letting go of that confirmation bias, you're not even going to see it, right? It's going to come, and it's like maybe the diaper drive, and you said, no, I don't want to put that pressure on the families, they already have their own struggles, please, no, we don't want that from you. Right? Then
Mhm.
maybe God's like, well, that was that was for you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Julia. It has been such a joy. Give us your book information one more time before we wrap up.
Sure. Yes. Thank you for having me, as always. So you can find the book three major places. So obviously on Amazon, you can go. And there's a paperback version, and there's also a Kindle version if you are more of a digital reader. And then you can also go on our Sunday Visitors website, so the publisher's website. And then you can also go on my website, which is juliamariehogan.com. If you want a signed copy, I sign it, and then I send some fun stickers with it too. So if you're wanting a signed copy, you can always order from my website, but order from the place that's most convenient for you. I say that's the way to go.
Awesome. Sounds good. We have the Amazon link in the show notes, so you can check out there if you want. But the stickers and the sign sound really fun. So
I
I
know.
think I would personally go to your personal website and grab
I
it there.
also have, you can't really see it, but I have my little work in progress sweatshirt for sale too on the website. So if you want a little reminder, for your wardrobe, you can also pick one up on my website there.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, you too, Jill.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast app, make sure that you hit subscribe so that you can get all of our updates automatically in your app on YouTube. And we also ask that you leave us a review or a comment. If you're in a podcast app, leave us a review. That helps us get seen by more people. And on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you loved from the episode and send it on to a friend. I am sure that you know someone who really needs the message in this podcast from today. I also encourage you to check out Pink Salt Riot. That is my company that sponsors this podcast. We have an incredible online shop full of all kinds of beautiful and unique Christian lifestyle goods. You can shop our whole line at pinksaltriot.com. I'll see you next week.